The third of these drafting aids that you have at your disposal, let's click the right mouse button again. Here's drafting aids, or is the group of object snap drafting aids. So we've dealt with grid and polar tracking. Let's now go to object snap. What I've done here is select all, and end, midpoint, center, node, intersection and so on are all selected, and object snap is on. Let's demonstrate how it works. If I were to draw a line and start a line from this point here, I'll roll in a little. Because object snap is on, as I move near the circumference of the line, the little indicator says I'll go somewhere on that circumference. But if I get near the quadrant of the line, see how now in the quadrant the little flyover changes to a little diamond shape. So I've picked up precisely the quadrant of that circle. I've still got polar tracking on, so let us turn polar tracking off. We can go to edit, and no, we can't. That's one way to turn object snap on and off. I think we can turn polar tracking off with F8. We'll see. So to hit the escape key, come back into the drawing. I'll U for undo that, and no, I can't. So let me get rid of that line and erase that line. Let's go back to drafting aids, polar tracking, yeah, F8. So that key actually wasn't working. We'll fix that up in later versions, so I'll turn it off there. Let's get back to our original argument. This line was drawn from out here to the quadrant of that circle. I could equally draw from somewhere out there to the center of that circle. Let's go L for line. One of the other entity snap options is end. So if I move my mouse somewhere here, in a moment it will snap to end, and that's a rectangle flyover. So now I'm anchored precisely at that end of that line. If I now wanted to go to the other quadrant of that circle, I could go to the end point of this line, or as I move along, you watch the little flyover, there's the midpoint of that line, and further along we can get to the end of there. So let's go to the midpoint of that line there. Now we could go, I think, perpendicular to... Perpendicular is not coming on at the moment, it's the nearest option there. Let's go across to there, that's still nearest. We may be able to find the perpendicular to this one. No, it's still there. So let's go end point. Surely we can get perpendicular to here. And again, that's not coming. The little crisscross is the nearest option, which just latches onto it. So you can see we have a few little glitches to fix up. There we go, perpendicular to that circle. So that line there comes across there and comes perpendicular. Now let's return to our settings. Object snap. It's really rather silly to run with all of these on. You might start by taking most of them off and just running with object snap on and going to the grips. So I'll go OK. Now grips are these handles. When I click on a circle I get 4 grips, one each at each of the quadrants. If I click on a line I get the 2 endpoints and the midpoint. Similarly, if I pick an ellipse, you see I get the middle, and not quite sure why that point shows on an ellipse, but it's another one of these grips. Here's a multi-line. If I zoom right in, can you see it's 2 lines? So if I click on the multi-line and zoom out, I get an anchor point there, or a grip in that direction. A rectangle. I've drawn a rectangle here. Click on it. I have 4 grips on the rectangle. So here's a polygon. There should be one at each vertex of the polygon. This is a polyline. To clear those grips you hit the escape key. Here's a polyline, which is one single line segment. So every entity in a drawing has got these grips on it, and we can use them to latch onto geometric points in the drawing, as we've been doing when we were drawing those lines. So it's a very useful technique indeed. You might want, for the sake of argument, to do another circle centered at the center of this circle, so it would be C for circle. It being the program is asking you for a center point. Just move your mouse to the circumference of the circle. That's interesting. We've only left the grips one on. We should be able to get to the center of that circle if our grips had been working well. Let's come over here. No, again, the quadrant option is taking precedence. We'll turn our it's edit and object snap off now. We'll right click and go back to drafting aids and pick center, taking the grips option off, and OK that. Now C for circle, we try again. We come close to this circle here and we should be able to pick up the center. Now again, that's not working. What did we forget to do? Right click, drafting aids, object snap, we forgot to turn it on. Now third time lucky, C for circle, and you can see here we can latch onto the center of that circle, so we've been able to draw two concentric circles using these object or entity snaps. So you need to get on top of those, and you can see we have a little more work to do with our program to make all of them work properly.